How's that? It is one of the realities of growing old. I cannot see in dark places anymore. And you know, when I go into dark places, I really go into dark places.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the good people rest. Not saying anything bad about you all. But I like dead people. They don't talk back. They don't look the other way. You can feel them, you know. And this time of year, I love walking. The sidewalks are clear. I don't have to worry about ice except last night. But when that sun starts getting longer and it starts to be light out at 7 o'clock at night, there's no better place to walk for me than down 3rd Street and down 4th Street. When you start seeing that sun going down and that not bright orange sky, but that dulled sky, I don't know about you all, but it makes me feel whole. It makes me feel like a townie. It makes me feel Winona. And this town has got spirits. It's got amazing people, amazing myths.
And so many of them you don't even get to hear about. There are like entire regions of the city of Winona, Minnesota that never get written about, never get talked about.
Well, the old Winona newspaper, they talked about everything, and I think they took pleasure in going down to that East End and those little bitty houses where people were living on top of each other. I think they liked to write about that. Maybe it made them feel higher up. But when you want to know the real history of Winona, it's about people down by the tracks. People grew up on the other side of life. The people on the losing end.
The people that life fell on. The people who came over to this country looking for another chance. And you'd think, the people of Winona would think, look at those people living out in the East End in those tacky little houses. Oh, they built a church. What a beautiful church. Oh, hey, they must have saved up their money. Yeah, right. Let's hear about those people once in a while, please.
You think about those little houses in the East End. They weren't just Grandma and Grandpa. They were Grandpa and Grandma, fathers and daughters and sons and cousins and brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews. They were all running around. And when that sun came up, they got themselves out of the house because there was no room to breathe in those houses.
And there were really no public spaces early on either. You either basically were at home or you were at work or you were at church. They had to get out. They had to really get the heck out of there. I get that.
And I don't think that ever left them. They're still getting up at 5 or 5:30 every morning. When the sun comes up, we go to work. We go read our books. We go do our thing. We haven't cluttered our mind. Our mind is fresh and clear in the morning. So how are we going to start this thing today?
I think we already did. I think that for me, this one started out, it's just like let's put it this way. I woke up this morning. I saw how much I slept. I checked my sleep app. 98 out of 100. 7 hours and 40 minutes. That's great. That's what my first thing they did. And then I thank God for letting me wake up in Winona, Minnesota another day, because this is the greatest place in the world. And I really did think to myself, what am I going to do today? And then I remembered, it's reading day. And I'm going to tell you not all about, but tell you some stories.
Me too.
Yeah. And then I said to Merle, you want any pictures for this time? And he made a couple requests, St. Stan's.
St. Stan's in the hurryback.
And damned if I didn't go spend the rest of the afternoon having memories about St. Stan's.
I'm a bad boss.
And my one time at the hurryback, I remembered today that I have been at the hurryback.
Oh, yeah.
Not for a very long time, but I do want to start out. I guess our game plan is I'm going to start out with the dog and pony show up here. Merle is going to share some stories. I've got one story, the bloody bucket. What are you looking for, dude?
Well, I got 6 stories, so we should be okay.
Yeah. I'll go, then he goes for a while, and I'll go, and he goes for a while, and then you guys will all start rushing for the door if we do our job right. So, with no further ado, want to make sure, do I sound good, Kelsey? All right. All right. Let's see here. This is not Stories of Old Homer Road, by the way. This is a brief outline. This is my tribute to a part of Winona that nobody ever talks about. We're going to be talking about the Old Stone Road, talking about the Minneowa Club in, I guess, chronological order, the Wind Teepee Cabins, which I'd never heard of, the Hot Fish Shop. How many of you have been to the Hot Fish Shop? More than once? Once in the summer of 1988, my aunt and my uncle took me there. And then finally, the big ticket, the Black Horse Tavern. And it's basically just me trying to get my head around all of the weird stuff going on in Homer, Minnesota. As a little kid, we would drive up from Milwaukee on I-90. We'd cross the river at La Crosse, and we're almost to Winona. And we're all going nuts because my mom and dad are from Winona. They love Winona. We kids love Winona. And if you're in Homer, you're just about there. But in Homer, there was also the eye candy. There was the wagon wheels and the big horse. The Black Horse Tavern. Mom, Dad, can we drive around and see what's there? No. I still remember that. Well, at any rate, here's the original plot of Homer, Minnesota. It's probably not showing up very well, but you'll notice it's crammed up there against the Mississippi River, and there's not a heck of a lot of it. Here is what it looks like in right around 1955. Now, I don't know, is there a pointer thingy in this thing? Crap. Taking a look at number 01 and number 02. That is the Hot Fish Shop is 01, and 02 is the Wind Teepee Cabins. And that crossing there that shows to me looks like a railroad, was a railroad. And that Mankato Avenue, that's the roundabout, folks. This is Roundabout City. This has been paved. But back in the day, it was a great, big, huge swamp full of nothing. You could get out there and do anything you liked. You could hunt, you could fish, you could make alcohol. And eventually they started filling that in too, but it took them a good long time. Number 3 is the Boobs Brewery, which that was another sign that we were coming to Winona. And then in I forget what year, they turned it. I can't forget, but hello? Okay, we're good. I don't remember what year, but they turned it into Mexico, USA. And honest to God, imagine, well, maybe you were an 11-year-old kid going to Mexico, USA. And was anybody here a kid that went to Mexico? How awesome was that? It was just expanding my brain. Well, at any rate, what really expands my brain is this is how you got to Winona before 1960. You came in through Homer and you took the roundabout way around the Great Big Lagoon. Now, I know there are many of you in this room who have done this all the time. I'm not from here. This is new to me. I have not driven that road probably 10 times since I moved here. Old Homer Road, here's a view of Winona in 1866, and way off to the left That's Sugarloaf, or Wapashaw's Cap, as it was also known. And down to the left of that is Homer. Here's another 1860 map, and you will see the number 31. That's basically a lake now. That's basically underwater now. And the territory, the land that the Black Horse is on is going to be 31, and Mineola is going to be there too. This is another graphic of Highway 61 showing how the road used to get to Winona and how it gets there now. A view of Old Mankato Avenue going up the hill. To the right, you see Sugarloaf Road. To the right, that's how Mankato Avenue used to run back in the day. It used to go straight up Sugarloaf Road. And you would follow that south to Homer. And this is a somewhat tweaked version of just the old Mankato Road around 1920. The Peter Boob Brewery. And again, a little tribute to Winona's Mexican mini world. It was a couple of people from like Galesville who weren't even Mexican. They just like buying Mexican stuff and selling it to people. The Mineola Club, I don't know how much they tell you about it here, but it was established and it was basically a place for the wealthier people of Winona to spend the summer in a nice cottage, a pleasant setting. And Roxy was just telling me that the cottages were very nice, not necessarily fancy, but nice. And the Watkins family and the Hillier family would be out there, and they would summer there, and then they'd go home for the winter, accessible by carriage, boat, or train from Winona. But it lost membership over the years as the founders kind of lost interest in it or died off, and it closed during World War II. Okay. I couldn't find do you see number 5 and number 6? I should have put more copies of that map in the slide deck. The Black Horse is number 5, and the Mineola Club is number 6. It had to be completely under the bluff, because, that's what made, it was just cooler. There was fresh air. There weren't any trains or horses or cars driving around. And they had their own little swimming pool. And I can't get a picture of that, but I will tomorrow. All right. Here are some of the nice people, the original founders of the Mineola Club, and you'll see the Tawneys, the Gallaghers, Maxwell, Watkins, Light, Miller, Maxwell. There's the Rockledge Mansion, which was also in Homer. Here we have the Hot Fish Shop to the left. To the right, we have Wind Teepee Cabins. Let's go there. The Hot Fish Shop was opened on Christmas Day, 1931 at 7th and Mankato Avenue. It was a soft drink parlor that wasn't making any money during the Depression, so Henry H. Kowaleski decides, let's make it a restaurant. And this guy's name was Harry Kowalewski. I mean, his middle name was Harry. I thought that Harry was short for Henry. Did they call him Hank? In 1934, they decided to put in a new Washington Kosciuszko school. They leveled that whole block, and they sold the houses off for dismantling. And Henry Kowalewski moved his restaurant out to the intersection of Highway 14 and Mankato Avenue, the happy roundabout land. He opened his second location in December 1935. You don't need me to tell you about the Hot Fish Shop. It is the most mourned building in the history of Winona County, Minnesota. Kids who weren't even alive, who weren't even alive in the same century as the Hot Fish Shop, miss the Hot Fish Shop. If they built another one, we'd all be out there. But for what it's worth, it had a gas station, it had postcards, the Fisherman's Lodge, Polish Pride. You see this postcard? Everybody's seen this postcard. You would go to the restaurant, you would get a pre-stamped postcard to send to somebody, and they'd even mail it for you. That was fantastic advertising. It was a complete and total loss. Oh, this is, I think, was there a 4 something saloon or 7 aces or 4 hearts? Or, that was downtown though, was it not? This bar had a name, and I call it They Lost the Bet because it's an AI thing. The Midjourney decided to put all those dudes in suits in the pouring rain in front of a bar. And they were like, how the heck am I going to explain that? And I decided they lost the bet. I don't know what the bet was, but these goofballs are all standing out there in the freezing rain because they lost the bet. Win Teepee Cabins, easily the most fascinating Winonan I never knew about until I got here. That would be Caroline Blanche Hunter, born in Pepin, Wisconsin, the founder of Win Teepee Cabins. Anybody remember the Win Teepee Cabins? Okay, we got some here. They were right there where Brewski's is now, and the gas station at 958 Mankato Avenue. I think it's called Joe's now. Blanche Hunter was running a gas station there in 1927 called Gopher Oil. She was not really cut out to be a great oil saleswoman, but she took it seriously. When the gas station went broke in 1929, she had Plan B for her little patch of land out at Highway 14 and Mankato Avenue, the Win Teepee Cabins. And we're going to see the prettiest and coolest camp in southern Minnesota, golf links, private baths, electric, everything you need to have fun out in the swamp. Remember, this is all in the great big huge swamp. I need to say that she had a good working relationship with her neighborhood, Henry Kovalevsky across the street, that you could make arrangements to have Hot Fish Shop meals dropped off at your cabin as often as you felt you needed them. It had cabins, it had event space, and this space was, in the words of somebody, available, the rent by the month, the week, the day, the hour, the half hour. Al Paffrath told me he was guiding once, and he was leading these kids, and they heard Blanche Hunter say, yes, by the month, by the day, and by the half hour. This kid turned to Al and said, they can't really sleep a whole lot in just half an hour, can they? Yeah, you're going somewhere in this world, kids. When it was time for Blanche to go, she sold off all of Win Teepee in 1964, except for the gas station at 958 Mankato. I buy all my gas there now because I have a Hy-Vee fuel card, and they use it there, and because it's Blanche's gas station. When she sold Win Teepee in 1964 to the Linahans, she retained ownership of just the land underneath that gas station. And she collected rent checks on that gas station until her dying day. That's the kind of businesswoman she was. And then finally, that's her in the back. I found a picture of the great woman. She dressed in black. She was short. She got busted for having bad brakes once, and she explained she stopped her car with the parking brake because her feet were too short to hit the brake pedal. She testified that in court. She could have been locked up for perjury forever. But she's just fascinating. This is the inside of a wind teepee cabin. This is really rough in it. People really did live here. There was a family that lived in one of the outbuildings, and it burned down, and it wasn't, it was really sad. Let's see, she sold it, and now we're off to the Black Horse Tavern. We're just about there. It was, in 1925, it was a farm. In 1935, the Black Horse Tavern was founded by somebody named by A. Moore. It could have been Alfred. It could have been his son Archie. By 1943, they're all gone. They still live there, but they are now, Alfred and Annie Moore are now renting to Mrs. Wamhoff. In 1943, 1944, they rented to Gertrude Kropotlovsky, and in 1946, it was rented to Richard and Seal Campbell, who were the iconic owners of that building for many, many years. And oh, what an exciting time they had over there. For just one thing, in December 1948, there was a massive crackdown on bootlegging in Winona. They're still bootlegging in Winona. And you see here my Uncle Fred Rutkowski at 161 East 3rd Street. And you see Richard Campbell, the Black Horse Tavern. You see Henry Kovalevsky, the Hot Fish Shop. You see Donald and Leroy Kuhlman over at the Sportsman Tavern. And guess what, Roxy? There's Edward Olszewski over at our hangout, the Reception Hotel at 279 West 2nd Street. This was the Black Horse is just like an exploding universe of fun. Tomorrow, Roxy and Bill Kozlowski and I are all going out to go find that last surviving Minneowa cabin up there, and I'll be back to report later. Thank you. And in the overtime, we've got St. Stanislaus Kostka Church, 1893. We've got, this is what it looked, this church was trying to serve 4,000 people in 1893. Do you add on to it? You can't, because there's just nothing left. No place to add on. Can you build a new one? That costs money. Let's just argue about it. Then I threw in St. Stanislaus Kostka School, built in 1905, mostly because they're now tearing down what's left of the St. Stan's School. I don't know what they're doing with that. It's where my mom went to school. She was born and raised across the street, as a matter of fact. Merle also requested the Hurryback, which is the little block next to the great big huge beautiful Slade block, which is now Herbert and Gerbert's. God, that is a striking building. My cousin Bob Rutkowski, when I was 11, was taking me around town. He took me to the Hurryback, but all I remembered of the buildings outside was the big red turret. I assumed that the big building with the red turret was the Hurryback. It certainly should have been. The Hurryback was the most important place in all Winona, he said. When in fact, it was a junky little building next door. And I hope that somebody does something with that building. The Cunningham family went on to great things. Royal Cab, you can see all these cars there that are owned by the Cunningham family as taxis. So they had a little mafia running around that corner. There's the corner over there, the old steak shop corner where you're looking down Main. And I leave you at the Bloody Bucket. It's the East Side Bar. I actually had a slide of it, but I couldn't find it. Otherwise, I would have put it in there. But they stuccoed it and made it even uglier than it already was. Like all the best bars in Winona. Thank you very much.
Testing? No. Test? Is it there? Test. All right. There are some things I am just not very good at. I got 6 stories here tonight, and I don't know how much time I have left. And I had them all planned and in order and what I was going to do. But being that you're all so very, very special, I think I'm going to read them backwards. So this story is for my last book, Across the Great Divide. And Joe and I started reading together a couple of years ago. We started telling stories together. I mean, I have a lifetime of hearing stories because I grew up in the Winona that told stories around the kitchen table with grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles who told the story of what Winona was. And we come from some really interesting places. So this is just called Downtown. It's nothing special. It was a nice night for reading stories in downtown Winona. Old folk were out and about looking for a trace of yesterday. They liked hearing about the Morgan block and some of the characters who inhabited the alleys and apartments in its dying days. I don't know when the Morgan block was developed and built, but it was a sad day in 1972 when the block came tumbling down. The family Morgan first came to these parts in the 1850s, and the family remains a vibrant force of Winona yet today. The mall that replaced it just doesn't fit. It needs another story or two to help house all the folks who are discovering what a wonderful town we have. The Morgan block in its early days was a glamorous place, a shining star of American excellence. It was inhabited by characters, misfits, and storytellers who felt the draw of the river. Many of the old buildings and ways have left us, but that river rolls and downtown is showing more life than I can recall in my lifetime. As we read stories of Winona's past and names like Morgan, Pomeroy, Dearman, and Newman get mentioned, I could see memories being triggered and smiles soon followed. A wonderful night for remembering as the smoke of the Canadian fires lifted and we talked about the roots of our past. So I don't know how many of you remember that air when the Canadian fires came through here. It was suffocating. It was tough to breathe. It was tough to get out. It was tough to, I didn't like that stuff.
And Stockton was so dark that I couldn't see where I was going. Stockton Hill scares me enough as it is. I don't know.
Oh, he should have seen the old days, huh? Stockton Hill, that was a tough road. We lost a few people on that road. The river rolls. 4 of my buddies are losing their wives, their soulmates, and I stood at the dark edge of the river. Nothing that the Mississippi River could say took away the seed of a loved one leaving. The old river keeps churning, stopping for no one. We can't hardly wait till the snow and ice have said goodbye. The fellow had a long white beard, pointed, and wore a top hat and bib overalls. I was down near the art museum where the hobos called home, hopping rails to get elsewhere. We don't much like the winters, and when it breaks, we'll be dancing in the river bottoms with old friends and lovers. The long winter has made us frisky. Hold on to your women, Hanson. Us demons are breaking out with our dancing shoes on. I took a nice long hit off my smoke and a deep slug of the Johnny Walker Blue I was drinking. My insides warmed and I could feel life awakening. It was dark and the stars were covered with clouds as I huddled up next to my small fire, just trying to keep the chill of the season off my bones and the demons away from my thinking. Life carries on, Hanson. Those were dark days as the Indian Wars and the Civil War shed its blood. Gray clouds as the pain of dying circled our heads. That taste of blood was tasted by all, felt by all. We had immigrants flooding our shores with their different ways about them. A whole generation of men lost and replaced by foreigners in a land of foreigners. We talked, acted, and saw differently. America. I don't know whatever Bess saw in me, but I loved her with all I had. Had a couple of those kids stayed, and those kids stayed, and the grandchildren stayed. Townies from the get-go. I fished every day of my life. I wanted to leave once I got here, but I found work. I knew if I sat down here by the river, my worries would get taken away. I worked in the lumber mill, West End, lived in a shack, walked out my front door and saw the river. Never left. Made Winona home. You can't leave this town, Hanson. Our spirits far outlast our living. You just have to look beyond the sea and to see life living past its time. I looked at that big money as I took a hit, seeing life pass as I heard my granny say, like a freckle on an Irish lass's ass, time going, never quite the same. I hadn't thought about that story in a long time. I guess if they're okay if you forget about them and then you read them the next time like the first time, and they still make sense. Oh, where are we going to next? Let's see. Oh, we're going to talk about that St. Stan's Church down there in the East End. Both the big one and the little one. And I call this church talk. That big red church still makes me nervous when I walk into it. I walk into it on a Wednesday afternoon, boy, I tell you, I can almost hear the marbles shaking. It was like there was a different God in that church than there was at St. Mary's. It rolled a little bit, a little more intense down there. Or maybe it's just because I wasn't Polish and I was a foreigner in a native land. Because there was, but that's what part made the synergy of Winona so good. Because we just all ain't wired quite right. We're wired. We're wired good. We're wired really good. But just a little something off. But that's what drives us. Oh, church talk. It's always been hard to enter the big church built in the East End. Red and orange colors have always sent my mind in so many different directions like an exploding star. I took one last hit trying to settle before entering the church that defined the Kashubian Polish God and heritage. I sat on the front stoop of that St. Stan's Church. It's a basilica now, and I suppose I should call it by its formal name. But I'm a townie, and changes come hard. The voices were coming from all over as I sat and smoke by smoke, trying to calm the voices running through me. One lady was near yelling, "This building speaks like no other, but I like the old St. Stanislaus Church on the corner that spoke a language not found elsewhere better. They can't compare. That was a warm place, cozy in a not-so-warm world. We sat shoulder to shoulder in that old church. We had 9 masses on Sunday. We were growing, bulging at the seams. We needed a new church. It was small, so we met our obligation by having so many masses. Hard to find enough priests, and we were quite particular about our priests, she said. Down it came, our church. Bishop Cotter and Father Claveter gave us no warning. In the quiet of the night, they planned its demise. We didn't much like the Irish Cotter, and he only liked us for the piles of gold we were collecting. Tore down our church. Our hope lay in rubble, no notice, no warning. Have you ever seen a mad Polish grandmother? There was hell to pay, but they didn't care whose toes they stepped on. As Mrs. Pronzinski told me, the old church came down without warning. It had been in the planning stages forever as people stopped talking, digging in their heels, and saying, my way. This beautiful new church was built with pennies, nickels, and dimes when a man got paid $1 a day working for the lumberman and the miller and the railroad. We disagreed and then just stopped talking to each other. I can't say that now from my eternal chair that forgiveness doesn't come easy to the Polish way. We were hard-working, stubborn. We came to America wanting something of our own. Those Russians and German oppressors fed themselves first, and we lived off their scraps. Yeah, I got problems. But that's all right, isn't it? Those of us with problems, we still got a place. We still got a voice. We can still talk. We can still discuss things. But I wouldn't wish on anybody the sound of voices from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night. Nobody. God, we talk about some stuff, don't we? Oh. Well, after you go to that church, you had to go to the bar. Because you needed to be able to talk. You know, it's hard to swear in church. Human nature, you know, it's a quiet place. But in Winona, you can only handle so much quiet before you got to get out. And you got to get away. And you got to let yourself go. These river valleys can echo back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I think that's why there's so many successful companies come from this town. There's a lot of noise in this town, a lot of echoes. So, this is called Back Inside. So I'd walked over to the athletic club, sat down. Trifocals are a real pain. It didn't take long once I found my stool for the dead people to start oozing out of the woodwork. I was having a cold beer when the old lady approached. Deep inside, I was happy when he left. I felt free when Delbert died. Not that I had any money, not a pot to pee in, but that there was no more picking up what he left lying around. Beer bottles and the smells of too much sauerkraut still makes my stomach queasy. Cooked all his meals and did his laundry. I was happy when the apparatus stopped working. He never learned to pick up after himself. He was a great deal like his daddy before, but at least he didn't beat me like his dad beat my mother-in-law, Esther. She'd walk into the St. Stan's Church and people would look the other way after seeing the black eye. Esther was a nice, kind woman who married a man without a decent bone in his body. Tough the lady who saw paycheck after paycheck getting spent before groceries got bought. I think Dell knew if he laid a finger on me, I'd have shot him between the eyes. Dell and his family grew up at the foot of Mankato. In the spring of the year. After all the snow melted, the water would rise and they'd have to move to higher ground. After getting married, we lived near Gabrick Park where the floods didn't reach. Dell always said living in the floodwater was something he was never able to escape. Like glue, it stuck to his inner being. It wasn't a year after his death before I began missing him. I was alone. The kids had all moved on to better jobs, more prosperity. Weeks, months would pass between their visits. I felt sorry for myself, and winters were hard. Damn proud of my kids rising above their roots. Finally, one spring, I started going to church every day and talking to my neighbors. In the summer, I would go to all the ball games and sit in the park watching the neighbor kids play. I made the best peanut butter cookies, and what kid doesn't like a good cookie? A lot of hunger in the East End. Nowadays, I just wish I had some dirty socks to pick up. One more sweet whisper. Dell, just behind my ear. We come from tough people. We come from stories. We rose up, pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps. I got two more. You all right? Ain't nobody left us tonight. Oh, okay. Okay. So this time of year I like walking. I mean, I just do. I like it now. Like seeing old memories, old times, old spaces, old friends. Some of them alive, some not so much. Their houses are still standing. And in those houses are memories. I grew up next to Republicans. Staunch Republicans. Good men who at their core were good people. Mr. U, Mr. P, my Uncle Cletus, Dad, Mr. M. Like a whole bunch of other people in this town, these are some of the men who shaped my living. The old boys gone now still talk to me. I visit them and they like to tell me how their outlook on things has changed. It hurts them deeply to be called a rhino, and in such a disrespectful way. They fought for this country, its ideals, compassion, and sense of right and wrong. I'm a liberal, so many people think I'm not quite right in the head. I like it that way. Following an order, Hut 2-3 has never been how I roll. I got a hard head. Without it, I might very well be writing stories, drab and boring. Those Republicans I grew up with worked endlessly and had a curiosity in how things worked. Their minds were with ideas, the pursuit of a new idea. An improvement drove their life. These are the guys who started and ran the companies. Many didn't do their best learning in the classroom. Keen observers of life, often moving when doing their best thinking, learning, searching for insight. Doesn't matter the field nor the obstacle. They like the challenge of understanding. Piquing curiosity seems like a worthy endeavor for our young people. Those boys have become so persistent, at least the dead ones, in lamenting the decline of the Republican Party as they knew it. They were thinking men and tell me they are nothing like today's Republicans. Dad reminds me that dying has changed his thinking. They liked a bit of Bailey's in their coffee. They tell me even on the other side that a beautiful fall day in this river valley is unlike any other. They like basking in the sun and not having to worry about winter and the lawn mowing and all the things that have to be done. I see the stones with the familiar faces as I walk through the St. Mary's Cemetery. The people in the church pews of my early years. They still got that quiet way of thinking, and it is good to hear the voices of the past. When I wander through the cemetery, the rusty places, they ask me to say hi. More than a few invite me to bring a drink and a lawn chair. They like visitors to sit and smile and listen to their stories. Winters are warm, 6 feet under, and quiet, more like the old days before the machines came and disrupted lives, they say. The Indians were right, they tell me. Dead people buried. Death is supposed to be gentle, quiet, and eternal. Till our forefathers opened the grave, that was death. Outcoming changed the life of dead people, and the soft whispers roll. It's like a dark alley sometimes. When I start writing, I never know where I'm headed. I got no clue which direction I'm going to take. The shad starts rolling out my fingertips. And then it rolls and then the memories kick in. And it's sometimes I tingle when I write. I'm in a little different space. A little different. I mean, this boy ain't wired right in the head. It's who I am, you know. What time we got? I got one more. This one's about to hurry back. How are you today, Roxy? Good? Thanks for coming. Will I ever learn, huh? The Hurryback has a long history in this town. It was founded by a man named Putnam, right around the turn of the century. He sold it originally when one of his oil company stocks struck a gusher. He was back in town soon later with the news that the gusher had done gone dry and he was left with worthless stock. Old man Trainer owned it for a while and it eventually ended up in the hands of Hub Zekis, who sold it to Art Cunningham. It's a good place to hear the stories the dead have to tell. Soon as I sat down, one of them sat behind me and started talking. Art Cunningham made me the man I was. Art knew how to deal with us boys whose wiring wasn't normal. His cast of characters that he employed was life's lessons walking. I can't tell you how many bowls of oyster stew I had sitting on the counter. Listening to Jeannie and Sophie talking yesterday. Sophie, she used to check the milk temperature of my stew with her finger before serving at the counter with a marigold milk sign on the back wall. Too hot a soup leaves a bad taste in your mouth, I recall her saying. People who just didn't fit into the hole felt at home in the Hurryback, you see. Rubbing shoulders with us townies made you a better person to my way of thinking. And if you fit in all too well in the real world, well, your scene would soon change for the better. I mean, seeing cheeky deermen shining shoes was a memory that gets etched into a man's thinking. Once I stepped into the Hurryback, I could feel myself breathing. My mind left the dead zone that the school club brought, and I felt normal, alive inside the four walls of the Hurryback. I was a Hurryback boy and carried it to my grave. Can I ask your name? I asked. Jim, but the name don't matter. Art Cunningham gave me a chance. He showed me a way. And for every Jim, there's a Bob or a Frank or a Steve that can tell you a story. Art Cunningham cared for everybody. He didn't care which side of the tracks you came from, I don't think I ever met a man more comfortable with the clothes he was wearing. Art got me a job at the railroad. Railroad life isn't for everyone, but Art told me to never quit. I retired as a railman. When I hear the name Cunningham, I stop in my tracks, take a deep breath, and think about what might have been, and think Art. And of course, if you're going to thank Art, you best thank Mrs. Cunningham, because in so many ways, Mrs. Cunningham and those girls, they had a voice in that house. Thank you. It's been a good night. You got one more? Okay, yep.
This one's called The Bloody Bucket. 851 East Wabasha Street. Everyone here knows it as the East Side Bar. Before Prohibition in 1920, Winona didn't have any bars. Winona had saloons. Saloons were officially named after whoever had the liquor license there. Only a few of them had nicknames. The saloon of John Kukowski and Paul Szeszewski at 851 East Wabasha Street was known as, get over here. No, there we go. The Bloody Bucket. The Bloody Bucket was the toughest bar in the toughest part of Winona, the Hog Line. The term hog line came into use about the same time as the Winona Athletic Club came about, if that helps. That was either in 1900 or some other year. Nobody knows. Some say the name hog line came from an ordinance against raising livestock in town. There was one such ordinance in 1907. Some say it came from the old Swift packing plant way out on East Sanborn, built in 1912. Both of these answers can be true at the same time because this is Winona. And now for the third theory. The hog line is Mankato Avenue. And obviously, I don't know this myself, but by unwritten law, any male of any ethnicity crossing Mankato Avenue from west to east for any reason whatsoever could expect to get the snot beaten out of him. A generation of Polish swains waited out on High Forest Street for their ladies to walk across Mankato and over to them so they could go on their date. This is how guys grew up on the East End: Polish, Bohemian, German, Irish. It was a tough life out on the East End, and it ain't all that easy now. The lumber mills were gone by 1910, and times were even worse, which didn't improve tempers up and down Mankato Avenue. And that's where the Bloody Bucket came in. For years, weeknights, it was local talent slugging it out behind the Bloody Bucket, and all of the great ones fought here. Joseph Knitter and Bart Sopa have their regular slugfests, as a matter of fact. One time, Bart bit off part of Joe Knitter's ear and was fined $16 in costs for sampling the eating qualities of Joseph Knitter's ear. I say this as the second leading expert on people getting their ears bitten off in a Winona, in downtown Winona. The master sits right up here. Don't ever get your ear bitten off. There was also the matter of 1894 when the Polish people were basically fighting each other over St. Stan's Church. It got so bad that 500 Polish people marched on the city jail to bust Adolf Blazek out of jail. There were 500 other Polish people standing there saying, ha, 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 ha. The only thing that kept Adolf Blazek in jail was the Winona Fire Department standing across the doorway of the city jail with their axes. Well, that didn't go over well. on the East End, and one time some firemen were walking down the alleyway in back of the Bloody Bucket to put out a fire, and Bernie Stoltman, one of the proprietors, said, "Hey, look, it's the firemen!" And they went out there and beat the snot out of the firemen. Well, they had the jump on the firemen, but I mean, that's the kind of place that the East End Bar was back in the time. Years ago on the Winona Facebook page, when I was still living in Springfield, Missouri, I found a picture of the old Park Saloon. Is that up? Good. Yay. On the internets, and I've been trying to ding it with AI and Photoshop ever since. The farm boys would come down here to the Bloody Bucket from places like Plainview and Nodine and Chatfield, where they rolled up the sidewalks at 5 p.m., and come down to Winona for a few drinks and a good fist fight. Pairs of strangers just beating the crap out of each other in the alley behind the saloon. That was just wonderful. It was a wonderful, and I'm told by people who have been there recently that it hasn't always been much better. You'll notice that the guy standing in front is I thought he was a Civil War veteran. I thought the guy in the wheelchair was a Civil War veteran. That would make sense. But when my dear friend Sandy Lewinsky told me, "No, that ain't the Civil War, that's my grandfather sitting out there in the wheelchair," I had to do a little digging. Like I said, life was tough out on the East End. And let's see, let me check out where I am here. Joe Lewinsky is sitting out there missing 2 legs. I asked Sandy, how did he lose his legs? And she said, "Oh, well, I know. I wasn't born yet." I did some digging in the Winona newspaper project, which is still free, and found out that he had lost his legs. And I found this out in an article, and I have to read this off the paper here. In 1921, burglars got into Joe's house and stole $280 from him. But they left another $220 behind. Joe had $500. They only took $280, and they went across the street to the Seared house, or next door to the Seared house, where they stole 35 chickens. That was the state of burglary back in the 1920s. The thing I want to comment about is, even though it was tough growing up on the East End of Winona. These guys that you see out here, they're all happy right now, but they've got jobs, they've got worries, they've got Prohibition coming up, they've got the Great Depression coming up, they've got World War II coming up. You know, they're in for a world of grief in addition to living on the East End. But you know what? I take a look over at Joe there, and he's just sitting there. He doesn't care. I look at the guy holding the beer, and I realize that this, to me, is the East End in a nutshell. These people came here, and they lived in the tiny houses. You have 14 people living in a 800 square foot house. How do you do that? You sleep upstairs, you sleep downstairs, you sleep under the floor, and the ones who work at night, it was pretty tough. You would think that these people were swimming in an ocean of cheerless pain. You know, just look at those Polacks living right next to each other and no heat and all of that. But you know, we were living the life. We came from way, way worse than this. And if you felt like you were swimming, you could either tread water, you could give up, or you can swim for it. And I think that in Winona, the people of Winona are good at swimming for it. When the sawmills shut down. Winona was on the ropes. We pulled ourselves out. We always will pull ourselves out. And that's one of the reasons why I wake up every morning and I say to myself, and I say out loud, thank you, God, for putting me here in Winona, Minnesota, because this is the greatest place on earth. Thank you very much. Any comments or any complaints?